welcome to the Album Man, and in this series called Why Hate, we're going to be looking at what are some of the most universally panned albums in rock and metal history, and just seeing whether people's utter hatred of them is actually justifiable, and well, why people hate it, and whether it's kind of unfair, or whether people actually have a damn point. So we're going to take a look at one of the most controversial albums of the last 10 years. This is All the Right Reasons by Nickelback. I mean, I struggle to think of a band in modern times that is as universally loathed as Nickelback. I mean, I'm sure there'll be many people watching this thinking, why is the album man reviewing Nickelback? Like, why would he touch Nickelback? Is he selling out? Is he doing just for views or something? Because to many, Nickelback are the embodiment of corporate rock. If Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil, then Nickelback sold their soul to capitalist greed, to become successful above all else. And this, of course, has caused the band to gain many haters. But I do believe that many of these haters haven't actually sat down and listened to one of their albums all the way through. They hate them because it's a kind of rite of passage in the rock and metal world to hate Nickelback. If you say you like Nickelback, then you lose all credibility in the metal world by saying these words. As far as a metalhead is concerned, you may as well be announcing that you are, in fact, a Nazi. In my early days, in fact, I used to actually refer to Nickelback as the N-word of rock, because merely uttering it will lead to instant condemnation. But I think that the Nickelback word is maybe quite deserving of this condemnation, so why am I defending the band, it seems? I'm not necessarily trying to proclaim my love for them or anything, but I admit I do have nostalgia for Nickelback. In 2009, I saw the band live, and quite frankly, it was the best concert I'd seen up to that point, hands down. I loved the experience. It was wonderful. All the Right Reasons was my favourite album of all time. Rockstar was my favourite song of all time. And yes, of course, Nickelback were my favourite band. Above AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, and even Dio. And I admit that metal was not really my thing at the time, and to be honest, I actually considered Nickelback quite a heavy band with songs like Animals and Side of a Bullet. I didn't care for Metallica, and I thought that death metal was just horrible, Satan-filled music for violent morons. My views have changed dramatically on music since then, but this album, I can't deny, was what made me fall in love with rock music. What took it from something I casually enjoyed to the start of a love and a passion. And it has been years since I've listened to the band, and in my estimate, they have slipped down a lot, with each subsequent album being more and more disappointing. The rapey lyrics of Dark Horse and the bland, regurgitated ballads of Here and Now, and dare we even speak about their latest abomination, as Chad attempts to get down with the kids and start rapping in his rock like it's the early 2000s and Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park are actually still relevant bands. Today we're going to see, really, if All the Right Reasons is, without pardoning the pun, hated for all the right reasons. Whether this is the pinnacle of everything a true rock fan should hate, that a metalhead should scoff at and sneer at. Is this just rock for posers and pop fans? Well, the opening track on this album, Follow You Home, begins with a rather unexpected double bass part on the drums of a grooving metal riff snaking in that wouldn't feel too out of place on a Pantera record. And let's be perfectly honest here, if it was played by the immortal god Dimebag Darrell, who can do no wrong in the metal verse, it would probably be heralded as a classic. And don't forget that Dime was a fan of Nickelback himself. The chorus in this song, I think, is difficult to not get engaged with, honestly. It's lively, soaring vocals from Chad Kroeger, and a chorus that reminds me very much so of Black Stone Cherry. Yet, of course, if it was written by that band, who are rather respected, they're certainly nowhere near the hatred that Nickelback get, then it probably would have been considered pretty good. I mean, hell, there's a really distorted bluesy guitar solo here, played by none other than Billy Gibbons, and no one can diss Billy Gibbons in the rock world. He, in my opinion, is up there with the best guitarist, one of my favourite blues guitarists of all time. The southern flair that he has with his wailing guitar and gruff backing vocals, I admit, make this a rather enjoyable opening track, and whoa, predictable structurally. With Gibbons' guitar, at least it has some variety over a lot of the mainstream rock around the time. I mean, hell, the drummer on this album Nickelback got was the guy from Three Doors Down. I can tell you instantly this song is more creative than anything that band's ever done. And this is continued by another of the heavier tracks on the album called Fight for All the Right Reasons. And this wears metal influence on the sleeve. Now, I'm not joking, I'm being rather serious here. For Nickelback and commercial rock, this has some rather cool guitar playing. I mean, it ate between the buried and me, but what were you really expecting for radio rock music? It's just got a strong riff to it, powerful chords, and sure, it doesn't do a massive amount different from the previous song. It's that type of anthemic, Bon Jovi-esque, rock song to stand up, pump your fist to type thing. But I do think this takes things up a gear with prominent double bass drumming and a nice interplay between the drums and bass. And I said before that Dimebag Darrell of Pantera was a fan of this band, and with Side of a Bullet, we have a tribute to the guitarist. And, okay, let's be honest, the guitar in this song is a bit ridiculous. It's in drop B tuning. I'm sorry, who needs drop B tuning? I don't mean to be some tuning elitist here and said, oh, you should only use standard or dropped in. No, I like some heavier tunings. I've played in drop C once in a while, but drop B? I mean, come on, it's a ludicrous tuning, and it just sounds kind of stupid, especially the compressed reduction, which we will address towards the end of the video. And to be honest, the guitar sounds like it was generated on a computer using Pro Tools. The heaviness, it can also be argued, does not suit Chad's voice hugely. He tries so hard to be aggressive and macho, even harder than M Shadows, and I don't think he pulls it off very well. It just comes across as, well, rather try hard. But the passion and love for Dime is clear in abundance across the song, and how much Dime's death clearly hit Chad and the band. The song does actually feature a Dimebag solo, which, well, honestly isn't that great. It's rather standard Dime stuff, and you can tell it was, not originally intended for the song, which obviously it wasn't. And it does just feel a little bit jarring, but I can understand why they included it. And this was a song that I actually used to love listening to, but now I find the guitar a little silly, and it doesn't do too much for me. And the last of the heavier songs we're going to be talking about is Animals. This certainly fulfills the Nickelback stereotype that they have two forms of song. One is the sex and party, hard rockin' song, and the second is the ballad. And this is the stereotypical, fast-paced, sex-filled rocker, which used to actually be one of my favourite songs of all time. Yeah, in fact, I could swear it was actually at one point my favourite song of all time, with Rockstar, my second favourite. That's not at all embarrassing. But leaving my childhood nostalgia behind, this song does have some terrible aspects. Chad Kroeger ain't Dylan or Springsteen, but dear me, are these lyrics bad. I mean, in the 80s, at least sex-fueled songs had some subtlety, of a few double entendres here and a couple of euphemisms there. And I mean, how GNR's Rocket Queen has more subtlety, and that quite literally has sounds of Axl Rose having sex. I mean, what could be less subtle than that? But yet still Animals and Nickelback managed to actually outdo it with lyrics such as but I got both hands on the wheel while you got both hands on my gears. By now, no doubt that we were heading south. I guess nobody ever taught her not to speak with a full mouth. And I guess they knew that she was missing as I tried to tell her dad it was her mouth that I was kissing. Lyrically, I think Limp Bizkit or the Bloodhound Gang could probably give them a run for their money here. The main problem, which is a constant problem throughout Nickelback's discography, and this song in particular, is how Kroger fails really badly to be amusing or at all funny when singing such ridiculous songs. You know, listen to Motley Crue's Gals, 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 and you tell me that tongue isn't firmly in cheek, or the hilarity of AC/DC's Let Me Put My Love Into You, or when Bon Scott was in the band and The Jack. The riff is boring and repetitive, with rather little variations. The chorus doesn't stand out. It's just a cliche, mainstream, we can be metal, but we're not really metal type song. And while attempting to be objective-ish, because subjectively I do like it, but only because of, you know, when I firmly put those huge rose-tinted spectacles on and look for it blindly, then I enjoy it. But if I try and look at it as a critical album reviewer, then I find the song rather childish, in poor taste and poor quality. There's lots of great sex-fueled rockers. This is not one of them. What about the singles? And I think this is at the heart of the hatred of Nickelback, and it's very important to look at these songs. The songs we looked at before are the type of songs that, you know, a couple of them I don't think should be too objectionable to a rock or metal fan. They feature many of the things that, you know, you come to expect in the genre of metal and rock, and do show a lot of that influence. And sure, Side of a Bullet and Animals are weaker, but Follow You Home and For All the Right Reasons definitely have some charm to them. The reason they're successful is because they're power ballad monster singles getting radio play, it seems every 2.5 seconds, and particularly, I remember when I was last in the States in about 2008, I think I last went, and God, I had Nickelback on the radio so much then, and it was like, wow. I mean, in the UK, you know, a fair bit you get it, but damn, it was a lot in the States. Hopefully it's, I mean, that was 7 years ago, so it's probably less now, but still, these songs have got a lot of radio airplay through the years. And Photograph is one that most will remember, most will despise, and all will probably be bored with. I mean, I'm bored of this song. I've heard it ad infinitum, and it's hardly a song that requires multiple listening to unfurl itself. Lyrically, it is a nostalgic trip through childhood memories and key events, it seems, in Chad's life, and that it's passable. You know, I've heard worse on this album. I've heard Animals. Vocally, I think he delivers a rather good performance, and I will maintain, I know so many people love to bash his voice. I'm going to disagree. I actually think he has a strong voice that's particularly suited to melodic pop rock singles, to be quite honest. And yeah, some have accused him of sounding like he permanently has a hernia or a mouthful of marbles, with an overly macho try-hard style, and he ain't Dio. But he ain't really that bad, and there's far less talented people that seem to do well in the charts. I mean, hell, look at the vocal abilities of will.i.am, or Kanye West singing Bohemian Rhapsody. People deride Photograph, but I think a lot of that is because they're treating it in the wrong way. Let's not treat it as a rock song, as so many seem bent on doing, but treat it as a pop song, because it really is a pop song all the way through. That's how it's intended to be. That's how it's written for radio and for video, to lure people into the album and to generate huge single sales. I mean, sure, the acoustic guitar sounds so over-compressed that you wonder if anyone actually ever played it and that it wasn't just put together on Pro Tools. And don't compare this to the classic power ballads of bands like Jenny and Whitesnake and Foreigner. This isn't the 80s. The type of power ballads that were successful then aren't going to be successful in the mid-2000s when this came out. Instead, compare this to, let's talk about some contemporary pop. Compare this to Miley Cyrus, One Direction, Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift. You might say, okay, that's a bit weird. Why would you compare Nickelback, who, even though I probably hate them, you know, they're rock band. You don't compare them to pop, because they're not really a rock band. Sure, they have guitars, and sure, they have some heavier songs than anything that One Direction or 5 Seconds of Summer have ever put out. But their big singles are pop songs, and Photograph is completely a pop song in every sense of the word. If Taylor Swift was singing it, let's be honest, it wouldn't feel that out of place. But also tell me with a straight face that Photograph isn't a better song than what these artists have produced, that the chorus isn't far more infectious than what they've produced, that the melodies aren't far stronger than what they've produced. Would you really rather this or Mark Ronson's Uptown Funk come on the radio? Because I know which I'd rather. And in a similar vein, Rockstar, which as I said before was my favourite song for a long time, can be treated in a similar way. The gradual build from acoustic guitar to one of the catchiest choruses I've heard. The gruff Billy Gibbons speaking parts and a song that just exemplifies the dream of being a rocker. But let me say it now, this is a rather well put together pop song. In fact, it's probably one of the best pop songs in the last 10 years since its release. The lyrics are, for Kroger, for a pop song, rather witty, memorable and quite clever. Sure, there's nothing profound about it, and sure, it's not going to have a major impact, but it's very good at doing what it's trying to do, create an aspirational rock pop song. The chord progression may be as cliche as it comes, and the instrumentation about as soulless as the fragment of a broken statue, yet there is an irresistible charm. I mean, I remember when I was at primary school, that's when this song came on the radio, everyone was singing it. I knew all the words and so did everyone. There was something about it that engaged people, and it engaged myself. And sure, you may want to call it the worst song ever, and that's your opinion, and that's fair enough to do so. But listen to the top 10 in the charts at the moment. Listen to them back to back from 10 to 1. And then listen to Rockstar. And tell me it's that bad. Look, Nickelback are hardly a great band or that talented of a band. And this video is not me trying to tell you that you should listen to and you should love Nickelback and you should have the same nostalgia that I do. I don't love the band really anymore. I have a great fondness for them and I probably always will, but I'm hardly going to be putting on Silver Side Up anytime soon. I'd far rather be listening to King Crimson or Steven Wilson instead of Nickelback's mainstream pop. But think of them really a bit like a modern Bon Jovi. And like Bon Jovi, they reached the peak, and I think all the right reasons was that peak, and they've gone sharply downhill from there, just as Bon Jovi have. Look at their last album. What a disgrace that was. It's not a classic album, it's not a great album, but it's certainly not the worst. There's far worse rock albums out there, and there's far worse in this band's discography. To me, Nickelback's hatred is greatly reminiscent of the Phil Fish effect in gaming. If you haven't watched the video on YouTube about that, please do. It's such a fantastic video. I can't remember put it together. I'll try and link it in the description. Wonderful video. But it is the idea that Nickelback aren't hated really because of their music, but because of what they embody in the music industry. Because they can sell millions of copies of an album with appalling pop-like production values and vapid songwriting. This album was mixed for radio, it was mixed for pop and not rock. It's highly compressed and artificial sounding. It's got dead and lacking energy. It's clinical, clean, safe pop. Sure, they used the word arsehole through it, but there's nothing very dangerous about this album or this band. They embody how someone can sell their soul to corporate rock with minimal talent and become millionaires, or bands like Baroness and Arthur Brown struggle to make a basic living. But that's the free market. Those who cater to the widest audience, the lowest common denominator, will always be more successful than those who innovate and those who carve a niche. I think we need to really put all the right reasons in perspective in the history of rock. We need to stop trying to compare it to Dark Side of the Moon, not compare it to Frank Zappa, but just compare it to pop albums. And let's face it, in the last 10 years, have there really been many catchier, many better pop albums than this? I don't think so. Save your hate for other bands and other albums, because I think there's some far more deserving. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching. Can't subscribe. Suggest some videos you'd like to see on this series in the comments below. And of course, long live rock and roll.